My name is Lara Winters, and I am 26 years old. I live in the small, often overlooked town of Zoomcrest. Growing up, I was never the loudest person in the room or the one who craved attention. I blended into the background, the quiet girl who preferred the company of books over people. However, that all changed during my years in college. My life, once peaceful and contained, turned into a whirlwind of chaos and terror when I encountered my bully, Ryan. Ryan was the type of person everyone knew. He had a charisma that made it easy to overlook the darkness hidden behind his charming smile. He was built like a brick wall, strong and confident, and he had an aura that demanded respect or fear, rather. I remember the first time we crossed paths. He walked into the cafeteria with his gang of friends, and everyone parted for him. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on me, sitting alone at my usual spot in the corner. I felt a knot form in my stomach as he approached. It was the beginning of a nightmare that lasted 5 long years. At first, he targeted me for my quiet nature. He would corner me after classes, demanding I do his assignments or fetch him drinks, but it escalated quickly. I was his personal maid. If I didn't comply, he would threaten me. Once, I simply said no to running an errand, and he shoved me against the wall. I could feel the cold metal of a locker digging into my back as he whispered venomous threats about how he could make my life a living hell. His past was a shadow that loomed over me. He claimed he had already spent time in jail for beating someone up, and I believed every word he said. I was terrified of crossing him. The worst part of the torment was when he pulled me into his academic world. I helped him cheat in every subject he was struggling with during his medical degree. The pressure he applied was suffocating. He would reach into my soul, making me believe that my only purpose was to help him succeed. If I refused or attempted to walk away, I would pay the price. I was confined to a world of servitude where his needs took precedence over my own. Despite my constant anxiety and dread, I complied, hoping that if I helped him pass his exams, my suffering would finally end. This routine continued through countless exams. My grades suffered because I prioritized Ryan's education over my own. Ultimately, I helped him squeeze through each hurdle, each class, convinced that if he graduated, he would leave me alone. Little did I know, Ryan had ambitions that reached far beyond the college gates. The momentous occasion arrived when he informed me I would help him cheat on the foreign medical graduate examination he needed to pass in order to practice medicine in India. This was the final straw, and my stomach churned at the thought of another battle against my moral code. Deep down, I was furious. I felt trapped, suffocated by his demands and overwhelmed by my own helplessness. The irony of my situation dehumanized me, yet I initially believed I was fighting for survival. The prospect of crossing him once again filled me with dread, and so I promised him I would help him. The pressure to deliver and my fear of retaliation always loomed over me, but I stood firm in my resolve to do what it took to escape this nightmare. End of Act 1. As the date of the licensing exam approached, I sabotaged my own feelings. The more I thought about Ryan and his demands, the more frustrated I became. I buried my resentment deep inside, convincing myself that this was the last time I would ever have to get involved. The anguish I felt was excruciating, but I had a plan taking shape in the back of my mind. Every time I studied, I felt weaker, thinking of how Ryan had virtually stolen my chance at a good life and education. When the day of the exam finally arrived, I watched him swagger into the testing room, an air of confidence radiating from him. I flashed him a tight-lipped smile, hoping he couldn't see through my facade, and for a fleeting moment, I yearned to break free from his grip on my life. I was holding on by a thread, and it was time to make my move. With my heart racing, I made the decision to drop my crutch. That exam was my opportunity. It was my chance to exert control over my life again. I walked into the large, open exam hall, the testing papers in front of me, and felt a wave of liberation wash over me. Every question I could answer without hesitation assured me how much I learned and how capable I truly was. I felt a fire ignite within me, one that had been dulled by fear for far too long. The intoxicating feeling of having control flooded back into my veins. I completed my exam, alone and with my own knowledge, instead of being dictated by someone else's ambition. After I finished my test, I had an overwhelming sense of accomplishment and tranquility. However, the moment I walked out into the sunlight, I remembered Ryan. He was not just a bully anymore. He was my nemesis. Would he pass? Would he succeed, having robbed me of so much time and effort? Then it hit me. If I could redirect my anguish towards revenge, maybe it could be worth every ounce of suffering I had endured. When the results were announced a few weeks later, my heart raced as I read them. My name was listed among those who had passed the exam, but when I scrolled down the list, Ryan's name was nowhere to be found. I felt a bizarre mix of relief and satisfaction wash over me. He had failed, and like a beautiful, poetic justice, I had done it all on my own. I smiled, for the first time in years, the burn of revenge finally settling into my bones. As I thought about how I could hold my head high after years of bullying, I understood that true success did not require the millions of dollars he had sought, but instead lay in my ability to reclaim control over my life. End of Act 2, it wasn't enough for me to bask in the glow of my victory alone. Determined to confront him, I sought out Ryan's social media and discovered he was furious and humiliated. I could see that failure was eating away at him. It was so intoxicating I wanted to take one last step toward complete vindication. I called a few of our mutual friends, who still kept in touch with him, and over coffee, I learned he was spiraling deeper into despair. The more I learned of his struggles, the more my heart swelled with glee. He had mocked me for years, and as it turned out, the world would not look kindly on his deceit. With each new piece of information, the final move in this game began to take shape. I devised a plan, not just for revenge but for closure. I invited Ryan to a gathering with mutual friends, a place where I could confront him. With trepidation and anticipation, I knew this was my moment. When he arrived, arrogance cloaked his demeanor, but as the evening wore on, I could see his tension unraveling. With my heart pounding in my chest, I approached him in front of everyone. I wasted no time. "How did it feel to fail the exam? I guess you should have worked harder instead of relying on me," I said, my words dripping with the satisfaction that had long eluded me. As I spoke, I witnessed the humiliation wash over his face, the realization of his complete and utter failure exposing him like a raw wound. The room became silent as his eyes filled with disbelief, and I could sense a mixture of shock and pity from our friends, but it did not matter. The truth was finally out. As Ryan stood before me, vulnerable and exposed, I felt a burden lift from my shoulders. I would no longer be defined by him or his misplaced authority. He had tried to break my spirit for years, but here was my joyful emergence from the shadows of his tyranny. As I walked away from him that night, with an air of confidence I had never possessed before, I realized that I had not only won. I had also freed myself from the chains of insecurity and fear Ryan had shackled me with for so long. No longer was he a constant threat hovering above me like a sinister cloud. My life began anew, unburdened and unafraid. End of Act 3 now, I sat on my porch overlooking the beautiful valley that Zoomcrest had to offer. I reflected on the transformation I had undergone, and I noticed that I had stopped thinking of Ryan as my bully. In truth, he had become a minor character in the book of my life. Success was never about wealth or fame for me, it was about reclaiming my narrative. My name was not just Lara Winters anymore. It was a name that told a story of survival, resilience, and ultimately, victory. And who knew? Maybe one day, I would even achieve great things despite the scars from that dark portion of my life, because success is not about the money you make. It is about taking back your power.